Good morning, everyone. It's Friday, April 22nd, and this is the Senate Agricultural Committee having their morning meeting. This morning, we're going to be running over the water withdrawal, surface water withdrawal bill with a group of people. And we're also going to review an amendment that Senator Parent has put together on your bill, right?
We already did it yesterday.
That's all done and
It's in
you
the calendar.
turned it in. I want to just make sure that.
Yeah, we're on notice today.
Yeah, well, good. So Tuesday, that will be up. And so Linda, I believe, sent out a copy of our latest draft that we had Michael O'Grady do yesterday from our previous meeting. And it's a little, I wanted to get your input from it and make sure that you had read down through on page 3. The third page is where it really starts talking about irrigation and watering of cattle. And I don't know if your pages are numbered or not, but right at the top of page 3, there's a small A in brackets, and it says registration beginning January 1. So that if you go down that page, you'll come to section B, A, B, C, and D. And D is where the exemption, the different things are exempted in.
Hold on 1 second. I'm just not finding it.
No,
Can you find me?
Senator Starr,
And
the piece that Linda sent out to all of us is actually an 18-page bill. And I think it's the original language from House Natural. And I think the information that we've been working with you on is much later.
it's on page 8.
Okay, thanks, Maddie.
Yeah,
I printed mine out and I got 4 pages.
lucky you.
No, when it first popped up, it said it was only 3 pages, and then it popped up to this 18-page piece, and I
Oh,
think
so
that's,
it's what you
original.
have starts on page 7, which is,
We don't have page numbers on this one.
On the one that's on our website, there's page numbers, and
yeah, we
Page
got
seven.
the full
Let me
bill.
find it there.
page
Yeah.
7 at the top says registration and reporting exceptions. Top page 7. Does that make sense?
No.
Page 1, Jackie, or 8?
no, it's not, mine isn't page, oops, wait a minute.
All of it does it, because page 6, surface water withdrawals and basin transfers.
Yes, page 7 starts with, registration and reporting exceptions.
What's yours? I can see if I can line them up.
Well, right at the bottom.
Oh, no, well, the hard part is
At the
yeah, because this
bottom.
one includes definitions. Yeah, but the
Right.
definitions go up to 4 pages.
If you go to page 8, line 12,
Yeah, we get to,
Exceptions.
Okay, so it's section 1042.
Yes,
uh,
which starts on page 7, and that talks about the reporting. And then it continues on page 8 with what we talked about yesterday.
so you found page 8, Jackie, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I
Line
think,
12,
well, but I think what you talked about, I think what you
Yeah, it
talked
does
about yesterday is
exempt
10, is page 7, that's section
yeah, but the
1042.
exemption that we care about for agriculture, irrigation, all that is at the top of page 9. It's line 1 and 2.
Well, yeah, but it starts on page
Right,
8.
but we get to the exemptions from A and B and it lists who's exempt, and we're the fourth instance of exemption, surface water withdrawals for irrigation, livestock watering, or agriculture, other agricultural use.
Yeah,
And then it goes on, so there's still the permit program, but that's for not agriculture.
right.
No, but it does
That,
include, it does include your conditions of the 10,000 and 150,000 on page 7.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Oh, I see, gotcha, okay.
Justin, are you muted or can you hear us?
I can hear you, Senator Starr.
Yeah, I know you guys probably haven't had too much time to read through that. Is that accurate?
I've had, I think, 6 minutes so far.
And
I just opened it up as I joined the Zoom call. I had to open up some greenhouses and then I raced up and there was some email for me to look at.
Yeah,
I was
Well, I-
following as you were just talking about where to find it. Yeah.
I don't know how the hell that got from 5 pages to a dozen.
Well, this one's 18.
I printed mine off and I sent you what I printed. Yeah. Well, anyway, so the way it basically set up, the intentions behind it is if you use surface water, and it explains what that is, and this program would start January 1 of 23. And you would, keep track of when you start using any surface water, you would, keep track of it. And if you use under 10,000 gallons in any day, you just, when you do your report, I don't even know if you have to report if you're under 10.
Right.
If you go over 10, then you have to, when you file your report later in the year, you would put down that you withdrew 1 day of 11,000 gallons, and if the other days were under 10, you don't report it. And then if you use 50,000 gallons in a day or 1.5 million within 30 days, then you're gonna have to list what watershed the form would be filled out, but you would have to list the number of days that you withdrew that larger amount of water. Does that make any sense, Jackie?
Yes, so I'm reading this, and I know we're looking at page 8, but I'm starting on page 7 because it says registration. And I know we were using the word reporting more than registration, but the second thing is, on page 8, it references the secretary. And I think in this language, that means A&R. And you folks were pretty clear that we wanted the farmers to report to the Agency of Agriculture. So I didn't know if that was in there somewhere else or if that was something that we missed on the rewrite, but I wanted to make sure that it was the Secretary of the Agency of Ag and not A&R that we were reporting to.
I think if you look though, Jackie, on page 8, line 12, the following withdrawals will not be subject to A or B of this section. So then scroll back up, and A is the registration part.
Okay.
So in other words, the agricultural sector is exempt from that, if I'm reading this correctly. They're exempt from A, which is the registration and reporting, and also B, which is the report. So I'm not completely clear that this is hard to read without going back and forth.
Yeah, Senator
And
Goldman,
that's-
can I add something? I also, I think I'm reading what you're reading the same way. And then I also think it's important for us to look at page 17, line 3. There's basically a whole different section at the very end that is about notification of surface water withdrawals for irrigation or livestock watering. That
Okay.
seems to be the sort of specific language that you wanted in terms of that minimum. So I
Yeah.
think it's just important not to make sure that that's duplicated, because it feels like at the top where you're looking, there still is some language that might apply to livestock and irrigation.
What'd you say, page 17?
17.
It's 17.
Yes, good
Seven
catch,
of
Maddie.
them.
You're a quick reader there. I think 17 is the piece that we were talking about yesterday, and that
Yeah.
is, so it is a little confusing where I think what Michael was doing was exempting us from the registration and reporting that everybody else had to do. Is that what you're reading, Maddie?
Correct.
And then we pick up on 17 where we discussed yesterday what we were hoping to accomplish. So good catch.
And it references the Secretary of Ag, Jackie, on lines 14 and 15. So that's who the report will go to.
Yes. I think the
So,
confusing part to me is that it also, there's a lot of back and forth involved here, and I might be wrong here, but it also feels a little bit confusing because at the top of page 8, that section is not, it doesn't look like the exception for ag includes that subsection C on page 8, which is methods of reporting withdrawals, and that talks about withdrawals between 10 and 50,000 gallons. The person withdrawing shall provide an estimate. So is that section C also applicable to ag because it's not included in the exception? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. You're absolutely right.
yeah,
That doesn't seem to be consistent.
and I believe that was everyone's intention, that if you use between the 10 and 50,000 gallons, you would just report.
Correct.
If you go up to the 50,000 gallons in a day and more than 1.5 million within the 30 days, then you're gonna have to file a report with what river or brook you're drawing this from. There's three or four things that you've got a bunch of different things that will be on a prescribed sheet that you'd have to fill out if you're using large volumes. So you'd report that to the Commissioner of Ag as well. And then he would calculate those numbers out, add them up, and send them to ANR to add to the overall list of withdrawals. So we would know, how much water, surface water are we using in Vermont and for what purposes? Isn't that what we've been talking about?
Yes. I think so.
Justin, what about the Berry people? Is that too little, too small amount, or could you live with that?
My printer's printing out this file, so I didn't catch everything that was just said. My printer's noisily next to my computer. What I can see that 10,000, 50,000 numbers, they're not too low for us. I have some thoughts, perhaps concerns on that I will get to once this is done printing, if you don't mind. So I'm just going to mute myself to keep that sound out.
Can I ask it just to clarify? So in section 17, where it talks about notification of surface water withdrawals, that's specific to agriculture, it says any person who withdrew 10,000 gallons or more of surface water within a 24-hour period or over, 150,000 over a 30-day period has to, that's the notification piece where it's essentially just that you're withdrawing, where you're withdrawing from, and what you're using the water for. That's sort of that like initial sort of just notification piece, but then I am still a little bit stuck on page, and I apologize if this is just me being dense. I'm just a little stuck on page 8 where it's saying for withdrawals of between 10 and 50,000 gallons of surface water within a 24-hour period, the person shall either provide an estimate of total volume withdrawn or provide meter data. That still feels like it applies to ag. And I guess my question about that part is whether that section requires data to be provided to ANR potentially. Since
The farmer doesn't, but ag is gonna compile, like if there's 400 dairy farmers or whatever, they've gotta compile those numbers and send the numbers like that are in the Lamoille River Basin, the Winooski River Basin, or the Connecticut River Basin. Ag is gonna forward those numbers to ANR so that in the end, we get a complete understanding and numbers of what we're actually statewide withdrawing from our system. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Maddie, I think you're right, and I'm still very confused too. Maybe Michael will have to unconfuse us. It seems like that one provision back on whatever page that is, 7 or 8, is in complete conflict with what's on page 17 in terms of the reporting requirements. So I don't know whether the earlier provisions take agriculture in or not. It's unclear. If it only exempts A and B, C is the one that says, well, yeah, but guess what? You gotta have a meter and you gotta report this. So I'm confused too. I think you're right.
it seems like maybe just we need to add C to that exception and then just have everything that's related to ag be down on page 17. That feels like it would sort of, because it seems like it's just duplicative right now and conflicting, both.
Be easier. Ryan,
For the record, Ryan Pat, my.
you want to sit over at the table, Ryan?
It's much more comfortable.
Okay. I was just gonna share just how again, Mr. O'Grady's gonna need to provide the what it actually means. But starting on page 7, page 9, D4 exceptions, the following withdrawals should not be subject to the requirements of subsection A or B of this section.
Right.
And you flip back to page 7, I see A is the registration, B is the reporting, and then C is the method of reporting the withdrawals. And it references those that are required to report under subsection B. And so if you're exempt from subsection B, I don't think that the method of reporting would apply to you.
Okay.
So I even though it does go A, B, C, it seems like C is subordinate to B. And so that is exception for A and B, I think would preclude irrigation, livestock, water, and other agricultural use from having to report in that manner. And then the requirements of page 17 and 18 would then control the agricultural and reporting.
That makes sense. Thanks, Ryan.
You might have a sharper eye than I.
Well,
You probably do.
You can stay there, Ryan, and we may have some other questions for you.
Happy to do so.
So I don't know, what we're gonna do, I don't know if it'll work for you guys, but, we've got an extension on this bill, time-wise, so, we're gonna work on it over the weekend, and Michael's been crazy busy with you know, this is a bad time of year to be redrafting things and, he's been right out straight, but we can get this thing, if we can get it sort of where we want it today, we'll get him to put it, in order, you know, like we'd like to see it and work on it, Tuesday again, you know. So do we understand that portion of it? Yeah. I mean, are we okay with that so far? Sam, are you able to chat? You're bouncing around like you're driving your skidder or something. No, your pickup.
Good morning, all. Senator Starr and Sam Lincoln, for the record. I'm on my way to the Maple Festival. I'm a passenger. I promise I'm not driving. So I understand. I don't have anything to add. Just making sure we have that clarification you all have identified. The only other comments I have on this are possibly clearly stating a couple of things in some of these things where it says just for irrigation, that it's for irrigation for agricultural crops or forestry, nursery type things like that. Because irrigation can be lawns, many other things can be irrigated that I don't know that we intend to have swept up in this. Or not, I don't want to say swept up, but included in maybe this provision that you're working on. And the other thing I would add, if you're inclined to do so, might be to add something in the findings about the importance of growing food crops as part of the reason of this bill as well, so that future reviews of it have that as your intention today of treating this differently because of the importance of growing agricultural food crops, forestry, nursery things like that.
Yeah, so you think it'd be good to add agricultural crops and well, you could do it in forestry if you planted a bunch of new trees, right? And they got awful dry, you might have to irrigate.
Well, I know I just actually in the last couple of weeks I spoke with a forestry company that is working on starting a nursery, and I would assume that those practices may require watering those young trees to keep them healthy. And I would like to just put a marker down to include forestry as well. But I think as I read it, it just says irrigation in general, and it I think there's a lot more. I don't know the totality of it, but I know that there are things irrigated that are more than just forestry, food and forestry crops.
So we'll we'll chat about that, adding that language. Do you think the numbers are pretty good, Sam?
Well, I think that nothing stands out to me as problematic with the numbers, and I defer to others as well in the ag community too, but I don't have any issue with it.
Well, Justin, I think I see him nodding his head yes, that he thought the numbers were okay, where they, and those are the same numbers that we got from the other committee. So we haven't messed, the rest of the world up by having two sets of numbers, and so everything is staying pretty consistent. Instead of registering, we've got that switched around to reporting, and we certainly got rid of the rulemaking and that stuff. The other folks would still have to fall under that. So we haven't. I don't think we've messed their bill up. We just pulled it back and put it where it belongs for us to be manageable and hopefully easier for the farmers to report and not be worried about, hopefully not worried about getting fined or something because they didn't get their report in on the day it was supposed to be in. But I have heard, and I don't know if you guys have heard it, but I did hear of a farmer that was 4 or 5 days late getting a report in or something over there and got fined $5,000. And then it got negotiated down to $250. And I think it should have been the other way around. The agency should have had to have sent the farmer $250 for the aggravation that they caused over the $5, the $250 of the 5-day penalty cost. But I've only heard of that one instance where things got kind of misused. You guys heard anything about that? No? So it wasn't any of you then, that's good. No,
We're aware of that, Mr. Starr.
pardon?
I was just saying we're aware of that incident, Senator.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know if it ever got fully resolved, but, so if you folks wanna kind of go through this with a fine tooth comb and find something over the weekend that where we should change the language, we have Sam's suggestion on adding, agricultural, products and forestry in there. But if you come up with something, we'll get you a Zoom link for I don't know.
Tuesday at 9.
Tuesday at 9.
You're on the floor at 10, but you can meet from 9 to 10.
oh,
So Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, we'll meet then until 10 or 10:30.
I think it's 10.
Well, we'll go as long as we can Tuesday morning, before we have to get off and go to the Senate floor.
Does Justin have his hand up?
yeah, I was wondering that too.
Yeah. Justin?
Yeah, just to go off what Sam said about specifying for irrigation for ag to separate out lawns and other things like that. I think I'd be more comfortable if we weren't specifically excluding, nurseries that grow tree stock, not necessarily for forestry, but for home, like Horsfords over in Charlotte or folks that are commercial nurseries. Because I'm sure there are some vegetable farms that mostly are growing food, but then might grow some plants to be potted up and sold. So I don't remember if Sam specifically said only for food production ag, but I would consider, nurseries of any sort to be ag. What does everyone else think about that?
I like it.
Yeah, I'd want
Well,
that.
nurseries it's a big part of ag, actually.
Right. I just want to make sure that whatever Sam said, I'd prefer if it didn't exclude non-food production ag.
Is
Sam, how do you
there
think about that?
some other language like silviculture or something like that we could use in there that would include those folks and not blow the ship up?
Oh, we got all kinds of hands.
Graham, you want to go?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. For the record, Graham Unings, Rufinox Policy Director at Rural Vermont. Yeah, I also think the recommendations of Sam make a lot of sense here. And based on, and Ryan can probably answer this better than any of us, but I believe that nurseries are currently covered under agricultural, especially least particular types of nurseries. You need to get a nursery license from the agency, et cetera. But Ryan might be able to speak specifically to what language would ensure that those things are covered. But I think in general that Sam's intentions make a lot of sense. You know, we want to both in terms of the language, which would ensure that we're really just talking about agriculture and forestry use here, and also language related to the essential nature of production of food and agriculture in a climate resilience future. And I think that's something we've talked about before with climate related language going forward, just ensuring that those types of findings are included, and we sort of put deeper and deeper into Vermont's law and into its narrative that food production is an essential nature of what we need to be doing in the climate future.
Yeah, Maddie?
Yeah, minor point. I just want to concur with that. And I was thinking along the same lines as what Justin brought up, that I don't want it to be limited to just strictly food crops. Like I know that hemp producers were included in the study group around this, and that would be another sort of crop that's not necessarily a food crop that we'd want to include. So I think that's
well, hemp and cannabis are both considered agricultural crops, or I believe they're the small growers. The licenses can only be given to farmers that are, I believe, actively farming. And of course, there are only 1,000 square feet, but you could have to irrigate cannabis if you get a license. And certainly, if you go to a greenhouse, a lot of times they have to, sprinkle water on their flowers to keep them good. And so that would be good if we got that language in there.
Would it make sense to say agricultural and horticultural crops? Is that not right?
Yeah, and that, I think that would cover. Yeah, Sam, did you have your hand up?
Yes, sir. Thank you. How whether it's Ryan or Michael Grady might have the all-encompassing, I don't know if you can quote it, but the definition of what is included under agriculture, so as not to create any, use existing definitions, but not to exclude any of these things that others have spoken of. I would presume that language might already exist, as others have mentioned. But whether it's forestry purposes or I believe for forest management or forestry purposes, I believe there's some nursery language in the definition of forestry, forest management, forest operations, has established language, I believe, for nursery crops too.
So we could use, running off from what Anthony said, we could do agricultural, horticulture, and silvicultural products or production.
I would look to current, because I know there's some new, in the past 6 or 7 years, there's been some new definitions for forestry operations, for forest management, things like that are, I think, more clearly defined in silviculture. I certainly appreciate the inclusion of silviculture, and I wouldn't omit it necessarily, but I know there are some clearer definitions for forestry out there today.
Talking about that end of this whole deal, sometimes I go by Indian Head or Columbia Forest Products in the summer, and well, of course, they're probably on a meter, but they're spraying their logs, keeping them, moist and things. You probably know more about that than I do, Sam. I don't know where they get their water from, but it must be from the city, because they're right there in New York City.
I'm not an expert on this. I do certainly know that, as you have pointed out, that mills are watering logs to keep them from staining in most human months. But the sources of that is I'm not aware. I couldn't speak to that with any specificity. But I know that those mills are located within the city limits. The large mills are. That doesn't mean that it's all city water. If it's whether it's well water, I don't know.
You're kind of breaking up a little, Sam.
Sounds right to St. Albans,
Yeah,
April Festival weekend.
so, yes. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair Star. Just to share some thoughts, I think Sam raises a good point about the definition for forestry or silviculture. I know there have been some updates to the language they use in that regard, but to incorporate both nurseries, Christmas tree growers, farming, horticultural crops. The current definition of farming used in 10 VSA 6122, like the one that the RAPs incorporates, includes farming means the cultivation of their use of land for growing food, fiber, Christmas trees, maple sap, or horticultural and orchard crops, or the feeding, raising, management of livestock, poultry, fish, bees, or the operation of greenhouses, and then many other examples there. So using farming may be a good way to include all of those activities in the bill that may use water for irrigation or frost control or what have you.
So that would cover all those different areas there.
I believe so.
And that definition is where?
There's a few places. The Act 250 definition of farming is the most commonly used one across many different other sections of statute, from my understanding. So 10 VSA 6001 sub 22 farming. It's also used in chapter 6215 for the RAPs. So
I'd rather use a chapter 6 version than a chapter 10, because we'll just get in trouble using a chapter 10.
All right, I can find that reference for you.
So, do you guys hear Ryan's suggestion? That covers the whole bailiwick of products. If we can find that in a Title 6, but if you get into Title 10, you're going to be thrown into right in the ANR. So do you folks have any dog in this fight that you'd like to talk about, or?
So Matt McMahon with MMR, we represent the golf course superintendents. I believe Superintendent of the course had reached out to the committee. Understanding time is really limited. I've sent the draft that came out this morning to them and looking for feedback from them, but potentially the changes you all are talking about now could impact how they use that. So I'm going to do my best to convey that to them, and hopefully either be in touch with Mr. Patch or the committee, whatever is the most efficient way to do that in advance of next week.
They're covered under this new law, right?
They use water for irrigation purposes. For turf grass, absolutely.
And you folks?
I'm Nicholas with Jared Grush's Alliance. We don't think this bill's totally necessary, but we totally appreciate the help of the committee to get us to where we need to be with the 10,000 gallons.
Yeah, that makes you wonder sometimes how necessary it is. I guess other places in the country are experiencing problems, and I think it's a full employment thing for lobbyists.
Yeah.
We do full employment things for lawyers, create new laws all the time. I think even somebody this morning in this little conversation, I guess it was with Linda, we were having a little discussion prior to getting in here from the office, and said, I don't understand this, I'm not a lawyer. And I said, well, how many farmers have lawyers that they can call and, things should be written so anybody can understand them. And, you shouldn't have to call a lawyer to be able to understand the law, but that, I think, are you a lawyer?
No, sometimes I have to call a lawyer too. So,
To get you out of jail, right, I mean, out of the issue. I worked with Danny Smith for years, and I said to him when we're coming back up out of Boston, we're getting down there to the Capitol testifying on the dairy compact or something. And he got into his lawyer mode. I said, I always had a little question. When you get your diploma from law school, is there something in there that you have to swear to? That if you ever write any laws, that it has to be written so whoever's reading it has to be a lawyer or hire a lawyer? No, he said, I never had to. Then he caught on what I was saying to him. How are you whining about anyways? To me. So are we all set, guys? I think we've got, did you find Title VI, that language?
I did, and as I said, 10 VSA 6001 sub 22 is generally the controlling definition for farming, and in 6 VSA 4802 sub 2, farming, the definition is farming has the same meaning as used in 10 VSA 6001.
There you go.
So, same definition.
So 6 VSA
40 section 4802 subsection 2, farming.
Well, we'll have Michael use that as a reference, and that'll cover everybody. And cut down a lot on the words. And then, of course, they have to hire a lawyer to have, anybody can look up 6 BSA, right?
Yeah.
I'll look it up right now.
Any other comments from you folks? Sam, did you have a comment?
Yes, I found the definition for silvicultural practices and forestry operations. And I will, should I email that to the committee and just for reference? I've also alerted Commissioner Snyder that this discussion is occurring to make sure he's aware of it. But is that appropriate for me to send that to you? Just some ideas of just where the definitions are on that forestry.
Yeah, did you hear our last conversation about?
I've heard it all.
6 VSA 4802 subsection 2.
I heard it, but I haven't had the moment to look that up. I've been searching in the Title 24 definitions of forestry operations and silvicultural practices.
Yeah. Well, good morning, Michael.
Morning.
Good you could stop by. Have a seat, Michael. I don't know if you were going to be able to make it today. We were talking about in the definition sections dealing with ag. Because we have growing irrigation for crops and food products. And we were wondering, we had testimony that some of these places that grow food also have greenhouses, and they do a lot of early starts in there, and occasionally they use water. And also like Christmas trees, sometimes when you first plant them and they're just getting going, you need to water. And so we were gonna try to cover agriculture, silviculture, and horticulture. But under 6 VSA 4802, if we reference subsection 2, if we reference that section, it might just reference that. It might cover all 3 or 4 of those operations.
Well, that's the definition of farming that's been incorporated into the drafts. And
It is in this draft.
no, in the RAPs, it's been incorporated into the RAPs. It includes greenhouses, it includes Christmas trees. It doesn't include every tree farm though.
Oh, it does Christmas trees?
It includes Christmas trees, but not say if you were gonna grow starts for, I don't know, the guy out in Hardwick that starts
Oh,
pine trees.
the ash stuff,
Yeah.
wood ash?
Mhm. So it wouldn't include that.
But what we're talking about is it would cover a bigger area, so we get a more exact reading and of what we're using statewide and how much water we're consuming.
Well, right, if you would, I would assume you want that as part of the exception from the A&R requirements. But it would also be part of the Agency of Agriculture notification requirement. Right, so it includes cultivation or other use of land for growing food, fiber, Christmas trees, maple sap, or horticultural and orchard crops. So starts for like your apple trees would still qualify, but say like the nurseries that are starting pine, I don't know if they would. I'd turn to the agency to see if they consider that farming. It would also include the operation of greenhouses, production of maple syrup. And those are probably the most relevant for water use.
So how was that gonna get captured under natural resources bill?
So it wasn't. Well, let me step back. It would have required a person to report and register and ultimately potentially get a permit.
If they went over a certain amount.
If they were right, if they were using withdrawing for those purposes. They were not accepted from registration and reporting. Unless, you were going to say that the water use for Christmas trees is irrigation. I think that's a fairly decent argument.
Yeah.
But what you could do would just say, except from A&R's program, surface water withdrawals for farming.
Yeah.
As defined in 4802.
Is that 6 VSA?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't want to put a 10 in there.
And then in the agriculture section, you would just say, hold on a second. You would say somebody withdrawing for farming. And I probably need to clarify that language actually, now that I look at it. So, yeah, that would probably be the most
Well-
comprehensive.
Number, if you, I don't know, let me see. If you go to number 4, surface water withdrawals for irrigation, livestock watering, or other farming usage. Instead of using the word agriculture, put the word farming in there. Would that work?
I think you can replace all of those terms with the term farming. Because the raising of horticultural or orchard crops is where you're going to need irrigation. The raising of livestock is where you're going to need livestock watering. So I think you could just say farming.
What do you, the committee, what do you,
Yeah, I'm looking at the
do you
language.
have number 4?
Yeah. So just farming, Michael, or farming activities?
Well, the term used in 4802 is farming.
Okay, so we've got to keep that consistent.
Do you think it would be better to switch out agriculture for farming and leave livestock and irrigation, or just do away with surface water withdrawal for purposes of farming?
Well, agriculture is more broad than farming, isn't it?
No, the term farming is
Wider.
is really the, as defined in Act 250, which is the definition in 4802. It's really the default. It's really the threshold you cross into being a farm. So if you're going to use anything that you want anyone who's farming, you want to use the RAP definition.
So would there be a downside to leaving irrigation, livestock watering, or other farming use?
It's a little duplicative, but
That's okay. I don't mind being duplicative.
I would say something like surface water withdrawal for irrigation, livestock watering, or other farming. This farming is defined in say 4802.
Yeah, that, I think that would work well. And then I think the way the draft you got set up, you put the exemption in, or under the exemptions section, you put us, Lloyd, us in there, and then they would report if they were withdrawing water from over 10,000 a day, they would report saying that they used water and it was,
Right, so that was the notification discussion you had the other day,
yeah,
not registration,
Right.
notification.
yeah.
So they would be required to notify the Agency of Agriculture if in the previous calendar year, they withdrew 10,000 gallons or more over a 24-hour period, or 150,000 gallons over any 30-day period. And all they need to notify the agency of is the withdrawal, the location, and a description of the use. No estimated volume, just that they had that withdrawal used it for.
Yeah, so we can monitor, well, that would get commingled with what A and R is gonna get,
Well, ultimately the data, right?
yeah.
But if anyone had over 50 or over in a 24-hour period, or 1.5 million over a 30-day period, they would need to report to the Agency of Agriculture. And they would need to provide basically some additional information.
Estimate, blah, 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 blah. Yep.
And then the data that the Agency of Ag collects is shared with the Agency of Natural Resources. I freely admit, I'm looking at the language on notification. I have to build in their withdrawal for a purpose. So, you know, I put in withdrawal means the intentional diversion for surface water by pumping, gravity, or other method for the purpose of being used for irrigation, livestock watering, or other agricultural use. I'm gonna have to build the whole farming thing back into that definition of withdrawal. So,
Yeah, because, we should know if they, you know, if they go over that 50,000
right.
gallon deal. So this, we've got, those changes then that we would, like to, ask you to do.
Sure, and can I ask you a question, Chair?
Well, yeah, I don't know if you'll get an answer. so.
You left me a voicemail about.
Oh, yeah, about the date.
The dates, and I
Did you check them?
I did, but I'm not sure if they meet your intent, because it's part of my misunderstanding about how you wanted the program set up. You wanted the A&R program to be left alone except to remove the farming withdrawal.
Yeah.
So those dates, if you leave the A&R program alone, they begin in January of 23.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and I just keep the dates for ag reporting to be the same as for A&R.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you intended that to be different. I guess I'm asking what your concern was about the date.
Well, by the time I got to my emails last night, it was kind of late. And I think I was actually reading it wrong.
Okay.
Because I said to Linda this morning, I come in early. I said, read this and see if you think there's anything wrong with the dates. And Linda read it and said, no, I think you start in January and then the following year, you send your data in. And I said, okay, I guess it was too late when and I was kind of hurrying because of the time. So no, I just thought I had that in my mind. I said, I better send Michael an email.
Okay, all right, so great.
So I think we want the only thing is, you know, if the stuff arrives at ag at the same time as from the farmers, and it arrives at A&R at the same time, is ag gonna get their numbers compiled so they can get them to A&R in a timely fashion?
Well, I gave them 2 weeks to get it to A&R, and then I gave A&R an additional 2 weeks to get that data to you.
Oh,
So that's tight. That's tight.
Yeah, but they'll do it if it's tight. If you give them 6 months, they'll take up until the last month. So I know how people operate. Yeah, I mean, I think I get guilty of that myself. Maybe we all do sometimes. No, that's good, Michael. No, I think, any other questions from the committee?
Oh, no.
Oh, Sam, do you have a question? Then I'll get to you, Graham.
Yes, just to be clear, the reporting is gonna be recorded on a monthly basis, but reported once annually, is that correct?
So for farming, they just need, if they're under 50, they just need to notify the agency that they had a withdrawal, one withdrawal that exceeded 10,000 gallons, or a withdrawal over a month that exceeded 150,000 gallons. How that farmer or the Christmas tree cultivator develops that data is not set forth. Not at all.
No, it's on an annual basis.
But, well, it's, if you've had a withdrawal of one of those thresholds over the preceding calendar year, that's all you need to report, notify. But if it's over 50 or over, you're probably gonna have to do some logging and recording, because the information you're supposed to submit is things like the daily maximum withdrawal for each month, the date of the daily maximum withdrawal. So if you're gonna be over 50 or over, you're probably gonna have to start logging and recording. But it doesn't say you have to use a meter.
And what's the 50,000 gallon? Is that what you're talking about?
In a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
That's when you report to the agency
Yeah,
additional data.
Yeah.
Or 1.5 million gallons over a 30-day period. That's
Then you've got to kind
right.
of keep
It's
track.
additional data to the agency of ag.
So it's 50,000 gallons and within a month.
No, 50,000 gallons in a
A day.
24-hour period in
Oh,
the
yeah.
preceding calendar year.
Or 1.5 million.
1.5 million in a month in the preceding calendar year.
And that's when you're gonna have to kind of itemize what water you're taking
Right,
from where.
Right.
Yeah. Is that clear, Sam?
I'm not, I guess I'm not completely clear on it. Sorry.
Well, we'll give Michael one more time and not interrupt him.
So part of the discussion with the bill as it came over from the House in this committee was the method of reporting for agricultural uses, for farming. And there was concerns, I think, probably the best voiced by Mr. Rich about the expense of using meters and installing meters. And so the Senate Natural Resources Committee said, well, irrigation, livestock, water, and farming can not use meters, that they can use their log records and report on that. But this committee was concerned about that level of reporting for just 10,000 or a little bit more than 10,000. So they decided earlier this week that instead of having that vigorous report, that there would just be a notification to the Agency of Agriculture that a withdrawal occurred in the preceding calendar year over 10,000 gallons and where it occurred, and that's it. But
Okay,
if
so
it was
I'm
gonna be,
sorry, I was gonna say, I'm totally clear on that. It's just a matter, the timing, is it at the moment that it occurred, or is it monthly, quarterly, once a year,
no, so you only have to report that it occurred at the end of the calendar year, and you just need to report that it occurred and where it occurred.
Okay, that's very, and that's,
But if you're over 50, then you're gonna have to your daily withdrawal, your maximum daily withdrawal, when your maximum daily withdrawal occurred. So if you want to avoid that, you just stay under 50. And it's good to see you again, Sam.
You as well, Mike, for sure.
Sam told us he's actually enjoying life getting away from this zoo.
I miss this committee and working with Mike for sure.
Well, Mike,
Good to be here.
Mike, I think misses you more than you miss him.
Well, I have received my law degree from the University of North Korea online, so I'm ready to be his
Oh,
deputy whenever.
nice.
So,
Any other, or Graham, go ahead, and I'll get you Justin when Graham gets done. Graham?
Sure, I wanted to make it quick. I just wanted to clarify something, both for legislative council and because Senator Collimer, you asked a question about is it worth just leaving the language on irrigation in? I just wanted to clarify for the concern that Sam brought up, and I think that I concur with, is that we ensure that it's clear that irrigation as a term only applies to farming, and that it couldn't be interpreted that irrigation could be for purposes other than farming and would then be included in this exemption. So that may have been understood. I just wanted to make sure that that's what I believe all of us providing testimony were in agreement on, that we just wanted to make sure that we were talking about farming and not irrigation for other purposes. And I'll leave it there.
Sure.
Yeah. And or Justin.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Justin?
Yeah, thanks. Just to go back to these numbers, I think they're pretty rational. I was a little concerned for a moment earlier today that we wouldn't be capturing very many farms in this, which would then make the folks at some of the environmental advocacy groups feel like they're not getting anything out of this. Because like I said, many of us are not opposed to the idea of knowing what's going on out there. But at those two different thresholds, the really, really small farms who barely irrigate, they'll just be off the radar.
Yeah.
A lot of farms will
we-
have to sign that binary, yes, we irrigate and we're located here. And then, many dozens of farms will be in this, hitting that 50,000 gallon threshold. I know we will. So we'll keep irrigation logs, and this is something we can live with. So I think this is a really well done compromise, and I want to thank you guys for that.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of keeping those two sets of numbers is, it won't be hopefully during our time or my time at least, but sometime down the road, 10, 15 years, if we ever had a severe problem with a drought and we had these records, well, we've got all the bigger users on record, but what about all these little guys? They called in and said they're under the 10,000 gallon deal. Well, you could contact them and say, are you still using, or they'd know. And, if you had a couple of hundred of them, it would add up to quite a lot of water if you needed to conserve some, and so the data, if it's used properly, it'll be valuable to have if we ever had an emergency. Yeah. So, well, I think things look good. Maddie, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Senator Starr and committee, in terms of that sort of long-term thinking that you're referencing, I just want to add to the conversation that I think collecting this data is really important for, our long-term just knowledge and management of our waters. I also think in those same kind of terms, this is really sort of, in some ways, I heard a farmer describe this to me as starting at the end point. And I think if we're really thinking about long-term management of our surface water and groundwater and general kind of climate resilience, we should also be thinking about ways to support farmers in using practices that will protect our surface water and that will help them remain viable in times of drought going forward. You know, for example, we've seen in the last few years, farmers that are using good grazing management practices and keeping, you know, healthy soils in their pastures have fared a lot better than folks who are doing sort of continuous grazing and not creating soils that can absorb and kind of slow the flow of water. So I do think it's just important. I understand this conversation is sort of trying to manage surface water and withdrawals and making sure that we don't sort of overdo it on that. But I also think unlike in terms of the upstream effects, it's important to think about that too, and think about supporting farmers in just keeping their soils healthy so that they may need to use less surface water in the future.
Thank you, Maddie. Jackie?
Yes, Senator Starr, I'd just like to comment on something you just said about, you know, having the smaller guys not necessarily, you know, having to report, but going back to when Justin was first speaking, he made several comments about it's not so much the water as the watershed. And I think having the identification of the smaller folks will allow you to, at the time when the reporting's done, and if there are drought conditions, this gives you a much better picture of the watershed issues of the water withdrawal. And so it might change the thinking a little bit on, it's not so much, and I think Sam said it too, it's managing to measure, and it will allow the state of Vermont to figure out, maybe they're looking at this in the wrong way, and they should be focusing on the watershed pieces as opposed to the individual users of the water. And that includes the golf courses, the snowmaking facilities, and agriculture. So I think the farmers have been very proactive in discussing this. The identification of where they are, but not necessarily how much they withdraw, is going to be a good roadmap to go forward in having that bigger discussion, and will allow you to look at drought management in a little different way. So really thank the committee for working on this so hard, and all the testimony that Justin and Sam have brought to the table. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't want to hear any more of you guys saying, well, we couldn't get in the committee. They wouldn't give us any time. Right?
You won't hear it from me. Thank you. I echo that. Thank you. Appreciate your work.
Sometimes some committees get nerved up and don't take the time they really should be taking to do bills, but we, you know, I don't get too excited about things. I just like to get the job done, but get it done right and hear from people that want to be heard. And I think this is a case where it's proven to be very valuable. You know, your time is money, I know, but it's been good time. And I think if we can get this passed in its form, I don't think we're gonna get too many complaints from anybody. So we may need your help down the road. You know, it's all in being able to count in the committee to 3 and 16 on the floor to make it work. So if you talk with any of your senators or even House members, if you can put a good word in for what we've gotten down on paper, it would be most helpful for us. So any other comments? Yes, Justin.
Thank you. So from a procedural standpoint, this is now called H466 as submitted by the Senate Ag on 4/22. Is that what we should, how we should describe it?
Go ahead, Mike.
So there's going to be a little bit of a procedural discussion that goes on, because according to the Senate Secretary, the body's going to have to decide if they're going to vote on this amendment or if they're going to vote on the natural resources amendment. I think what the chair was just kind of indicating is if you can generate support for this amendment, this would be the one that would be offered instead of the Senate Natural Resources Committee amendment.
So then, if the Senate Natural Resources one is being voted on, we would have to substitute this.
Right, right. I mean, that's, the Senate Secretary basically said, let's try to deal with this before you have to go to a substitute. Just, and that's why it's a strikeout to the bill, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not a strikeout to the Senate Natural Resources report. It's a strikeout to the bill at his recommendation. And so you'll just have to do a little pre-vote.
Does Chris know that?
That we did strike off.
That, how this is all gonna work? He'll be the one that's gonna make it fast.
He doesn't. No, he doesn't.
It will be about some prior discussions leading up to who's gonna vote, which one of these is gonna be voted on.
But it's all pretty straightforward here. Chris had a paper here and the bill over here and you had a cross-reference over to this paper.
He just did an instance by instance amendment. You know? He didn't do a strikeout, he did an instance by instance amendment. It's very, very common. Very common.
Very common.
Yes, that's all it was.
Yeah,
but
48 instances of amendment.
maybe common for natural resources or, but anyways, we'll figure the process out and,
So Justin, the answer is we're not sure.
Okay,
yeah. So what we're gonna need is a little help supporting the ag amendment to the 466.
But in order to get that support, I would need to tell folks things. And so if I said, please support H 466 as amended by the Senate Ag Committee, that would be,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And any help you can give would be appreciated. Did you guys, getting away from this subject, did you see, we all think we have pretty good air and stuff, and, environmentally, we're on top of it. Do you see the report from Vermont Biz? It states the Burlington, South Burlington metro area was one of only 10 cities in the nation to rank as the cleanest city for all the 3 serious measurements of air quality. That's why you live in South Burlington.
The entire state is well below the thresholds for the ozone and the other pollutants. So the state is not triggering that. And so the state as a whole is doing very well on air
Did
quality.
you notice what they said about Bennington? That wind blowing out of the south down south and making Bennington's air have pollutants in it.
The state is in attainment for almost every hazardous air pollutant. But the southern tier is probably at risk of going into non-attainment on a couple of pollutants.
Yeah, but that's because of like Albany and everything that comes from the west. There's nothing we can do to control that unless we sue our neighbors to the west.
Well, we did sue them. Ohio specifically, but we won. But that was years ago.
That was the acid rain stuff. wasn't it?
Right.
That
Was there any-
I was in middle school when that happened, so like.
Is there anything else that any committee members want to bring up? No?
I just had a personal withdrawal. Service
Yeah,
club.
you had a personal withdrawal?
Just in case anybody wanted to know why I left.
Under 10,000 gallons. I hope.
I think it was under the threshold.
If we could try and get a look at whatever is drafted up, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, maybe we'll have that first of the week, Mike, or Tuesday.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday, we should have a John Pearson will be back
Thank you.
and so he's gotta read through it and get caught up. Brian?
Thank you, Chair Starr. Question that we touched on, Mr. O'Grady's here, just confirming that what we suspected is indeed what it means. On page 8, the exceptions for surface water withdrawals for whatever will be titled farming. It says the following withdrawals are not subject to the requirements of subsection A or B of this section. And people ask about section C, but it seems C is related to B, and so if you're exempt to A and B, then we don't need a specific reference to be exempted from C. But that's a question for you, Mr. O'Grady. Does there need to be a C added there, or is subsection C just modifying how the report is to be communicated?
On page 11, line 15 and 16.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, page 8, line 12, the exceptions.
No, I want you to look at
Oh.
page 11, line 15 and 16.
Okay,
So there's an exception there for the permit. I don't think you need an exception for the method of reporting a withdrawal. If you're accepted from registration or reporting, you don't have to provide a method of reporting withdrawal.
great, yeah, I think that's what we arrived at, just wanted to confirm.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that before you came in,
Okay.
okay? Maddie, do you have something else?
I do, yeah, and I almost hesitate to share this late in the game, but I feel compelled to just let you know that we have had some conversations with some folks in the environmental groups who have been advocating for this bill sort of from the natural resources perspective. And I just want to start by saying I do see farmers as environmentalists, and I think they care as much about stewarding the landscape and natural resources as anyone. I will say, I just want to give you a heads up. I think that there may still be some pushback from conservation folks around this level of reporting. And I also share this to be clear. I am here to advocate for farmers. I'm not here to advocate for any particular environmental group. So this is not my perspective that I'm sharing, but I don't want you to be surprised if when you present this, there is some pushback around the reporting starting at 50,000. I think that there may still be folks out there who want that reporting to start at a lower level. And I just share that in the interest of transparency and letting you know that I think, there are still folks who want to see it, I think, at a more detailed level. So just FYI.
Yeah, well, I'd be disappointed if they didn't object. I've worked with that crew for a lot of years. And it's full employment for them if they can keep fights going. Instead of doing the right thing, keep a fight going and we'll keep employing you.
So they can go raise money on.
This relates to contractors, right, the builders. people like
But
that.
anyways, if there's no other comments, thanks a lot, folks, for punching in and coming on board this morning. It really makes a big difference if you're helping and, more hands make the job easier. So thanks a lot. And if you want to get on Tuesday morning, we'll send you a link. So if you have any questions, get them written down. We'll try to answer them on Tuesday.
Thank you, Senator Starr.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everyone.
You all.
Thanks.
For your work.
Are you ready to stop the meeting?
Yeah. Hey, anything else from you guys?
Nope.
You're all set with your friend.